Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Blame It on Marketing with Emma and Ruta. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about interviewing as a skill that marketers should have. And we're joined by a very special guest who will introduce themselves.
Hi, my name's Shana Pearlman. I'm a three-time content and brand leader at various B2B SaaS marketing companies. And I have a background as a journalist. So interviewing is something that I'm passionate about. It's something that I love to do. I love helping people tell their stories. And isn't that the best part of marketing? It's just fantastic storytelling and learning how to get the best stories out to your audience. And so I'm so excited to be talking with you about this today.
Wonderful. I'm feeling a little intimidated about interviewing someone about interviewing, just like ask the good questions, Ruta, don't fuck it up. But we'll start with our standard to get us warmed up, shall we say. And we would love to know what your marketing confession is, something that you fucked up previously, something that hasn't gone to plan in your career as you planned to.
Oh dear. Okay. Oh, this is a dark confession. So I was working on a campaign, and it was an event, and we wanted to get customer stories. And I wasn't going to be there at the event, and so we wanted to film some videos of the customers that were. And so the events lead said, "Oh, my event vendor has a video production arm. They'd be happy to do it." She said, "I'll handle everything." And I was like, "Great. Can you just get me a budget and kind of get a scope of work?" And we got a scope of work, and they were going to create, they were going to create customer videos. That was what we were told. We were quoted a price. Great. So plan everything. Everything was set up. She said, "Don't worry about it. I've got it in hand." I didn't actually look at the contract with the agency. And so, because I thought, it's my colleague. She's got it. I know. I see your face. I see your face. You're right. It was a big fuck up. And what actually happened was they thought that creating the videos meant shooting the videos, not actually editing the videos. And so we had lots of raw video, and they wanted an additional like $30,000 to edit those videos. And yeah,
Oh my God. So they held your video hostage.
$30,000 to edit.
$30,000.
What are they editing? A movie?
They were like long, it was like an hour, it was like, an hour long of video, and they wanted $30,000 to edit. I was like, I'll do it myself in iMovie. So
Can
yeah,
you pay
check the
me?
contract. Always check the contract. And if
Oh
anyone's out
my
there and like,
God.
it's my friend, it's my colleague, we've worked together forever, tell them that you have a friend, I'll be your friend, who this has happened to. Always check the contract. Trust but verify.
Also, the person arranging it maybe is like, their specialties events, and they don't think about the fact that you have to include the editing in
Right.
the
Yeah.
contract, like it's
Why
not
don't you
maybe
know?
their
Yeah.
area of specialism. So yeah, that's steep.
It was wild. It was wild. We
Yeah,
I
solved it.
feel
But
that.
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's a
Bloody
lot.
hell. I'm glad you had some editing skills, because otherwise, Fiverr, I don't know.
Not the same thing, but I've also had something similar happen to me where, let's just say, a client of mine was like, "Yeah, we're gonna make customer videos, and then what we're gonna do is we're just gonna ask a couple of very simple questions to the customers." And they were like, "We're gonna handle it all. It's all good. Da, 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 da. Just don't let the marketing people have any kind of steer or input into this." And then what they get back is absolute trash. And also there's so much footage that I can't actually, like, to this day I can't download the footage. There's so much. It's basically like they filmed the Titanic and my Mac is having a meltdown. I have upgraded my Wi-Fi, my storage on my storage on my Mac and everything, and I still can't download it, ladies. So I think just briefing and reading contracts and all of that stuff, I think, is very important, right? It's otherwise it causes a lot of heartache. So yeah, there's my confession for you guys as well. So on to the main topic of conversation, which is all to do with interview skills for marketers. Hopefully you think we're doing a good job. Maybe you can rate us out of 10 at the end of the episode, see how you think we've done.
No.
10 out of 10 so far.
Please no.
Love it.
Thank you. Okay, excellent. So why do you think there is such reluctance, especially for junior marketers, to kind of get into conversations and engage with customers and subject matter experts, and how can people maybe overcome this fear. I think a lot of marketers, I just want to add to this, I think a lot of us are introverted extroverts. So like we're secret introverts. So like we look and act like Ruta and I do, all bubbly, but actually inside we're like, ugh. So what can we do to overcome it?
I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about some of the stuff that I had to do when I was a journalist, and you crazy stuff like, and this is standard practice, and it's not very nice, but like if somebody suffers a tragic event, there are people, and I have done this, who will go to their houses and knock on the door and say, I'd like to talk with you about this event. And it's terrifying. Number one, it's not very nice. And number two, sometimes people don't want to talk to you, but a lot of times people do. And I think the interesting thing is junior marketers feel like, oh, I'm going to mess up and then the customer is going to not want to talk to our company ever again. Or I'm going to look stupid, or I'm going to say the wrong thing. In your life, you will sometimes say the wrong thing 1 time out of 10. But with the kind of interviews that we do as B2B marketers, most of the time people actually want to talk to you. And if you don't think of it as I'm going to mess up or I'm going to look stupid, but rather I have a unique position to share something of value with my audience that my audience is going to care about and they're going to get something out of. And this subject matter expert or customer is the way to that specialized knowledge, then that puts it in a different light. It's like I am the only person who has the power right now to get that value to my audience. And I feel like that's special. If you can reframe it that way in your mind, I think people will be a lot happier to actually just sit down and have a conversation. And that's all an interview is, honestly. It's a conversation.
It should at least feel like one, right? Instead of being grilled. Because I know you can sometimes, especially if you're nervous, you can just go down that road. Okay, next question, next question, next question. And you're not even listening at that point.
Listening is such an important skill, because it is so easy, just like you said, Ruta, to just say, I have my list of questions that I've already written. You should never be afraid to dump that list of questions. If the conversation is going in an interesting way, just like at a party, right? You wouldn't be like, here's my list of things. No, you actually listen to what they're saying. And then the best question you can always ask is why. So true. But yeah, no, always ask, and it doesn't need to be a fancy question. You don't have to look like you're asking fancy, important interview questions. Just ask why. And people are almost always happy to talk with you. And if they're not, you know what? Get rid of that interview and do another.
Do you think another reason why people sometimes go wrong with this sort of stuff, the approach is sometimes wrong, is that, like, say for example, if you are a junior marketer, you've potentially got a CMO or someone more senior, like whoever it might be, CEO, breathing down your neck because you need more customer stories. And therefore, as a junior marketer, what you do is you kind of go in all guns blazing. How much value can I extract from this person, rather than what value can I bring this person? And so I've run customer advocacy programs before, and that's where I found people do this all wrong. They're like, hey, can I interview you? Can I get a review? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I get you to do all of this stuff up front? And then what I'll do is, to say thank you, I'll send you some hotel chocolat or some wine or whatever. And it's not about how the interview or the conversation that you want to have brings the person on the receiving end any value. I think you're right, Shana, which is that a lot of people want to speak to their community. They want to be able to showcase themselves as an expert, and to kind of like get a little bit of kudos for the work that they're doing internally. And I find, quite often, I think the approach is the fuck up. And then when you get to the interview, what you've potentially already done is rubbed someone up the wrong way before you've even got there. I don't know if your guys' experience is like that, but I've certainly been asked to do like 101 things before and then gone, no, because it's too much. Like, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think when you're a journalist, it's easy because you have to produce a show. And the interview itself has to be interesting because that's the show. In marketing, we forget about the why we do things a lot of the times. The CMO wants this asset, or the VP of sales needs this report, or what is it? And you forget the why. It's really important to trust yourself. You have to trust the process in your own skills. And everybody has great skills in getting the value for the audience, because that's what we're doing it for. Ultimately, we're all if, generally in B2B sales, we're selling software. I've sold software my entire career. If you want to sell software, you have to provide something that's interesting to the audience. If you keep remembering that as your why, you can say to the CMO, awesome, I'm going to get you more customer stories, and here's how I'm going to do it. And you, when you are networking with people, when you're going to events are a great place to talk to customers. And even if you are just talking with SMEs in your company and trying to get stories out of them, you have to remember that why. And that is just really, really critical in order to be able to treat people in such a way that they're happy to come back to you again and again. I remember I was talking with a guy and everyone said, "Oh, this guy's so boring. The story is super boring." And on paper it was a super boring, it was for enterprise data integration, super boring lift and shift story. And I was like, "Oh my God, this is going to be the world's most boring interview." And I asked him the classic question, what would have happened if you hadn't used our project or our product? And his face lit up like Christmas. And he was so delighted to tell me about all the time that his team saved and how happy his team was and how delighted they all were. And suddenly it became an awesome interview and he became one of our best customer advocates.
So you've started kind of touching on interview tips, I should say, but we would love to hear from you kind of with your background in journalism. What are some of those key kind of fundamental interviewing techniques? So obviously we've got listening, like you said, we've got remembering the why, kind of trying to connect with a person. What other stuff is in that group?
I think the biggest thing to remember, it's very easy to say and hard to do, is stop talking. And when you stop talking, suddenly interesting things happen. The silence. People don't like silence. They freak out. And so you have the willpower to stop talking. People are going to fill the silence. I knew a guy who was fantastic at asking one-word interview questions. And he would just say a single word in silence, and the interview subject would just freak out and start saying all sorts of outrageous things. It's a really, really good technique. And so, yeah, stop talking.
How do you achieve that? Do you literally just like someone says something and you're like, how? Like, I don't even know how to pull that off. Why?
Yeah.
What is it? Just okay?
Yeah. So let me try it on you. Emma, contracts.
I'm now triggered because of that story.
I'm so nervous.
You're now going to ask me why I'm triggered.
Yeah.
Why are you triggered?
But no, it is. You're right. Yeah, exactly. It's that uncomfortable silence. It's making me go like, I just want to spill my guts to you and tell you everything that I've ever done wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
We definitely see that in the podcast sometimes because of me and Emma have done a few episodes right now, and we know with like the internet issue sometimes, like we're totally okay to just pause and like let the conversation basically have a dead end and then move on. But sometimes you see in the like speaker's eyes, they're like, like, oh, it's not going smoothly, something's gone wrong. It's like, no, we're all good, we're going to edit this together, it's going to be as smooth as it's ever going to be. But yeah, I've totally seen that. And God, Emma, we need to start asking more one word questions.
We'll try it later.
That's our challenge. Yeah,
we're recording another podcast later, so let's give it a go.
Yeah, that's our challenge.
Let me know how it goes. But one of the things that's quite interesting is with video interviews, because I was a radio journalist, with video interviews, you can kind of see on someone's face that they're done or like it's time to move on. Like I noticed on your faces when you wanted me to say more, you kind of raised your eyebrows a little bit. And so I felt that cue and I wanted to say more. And, then I started talking. Nonverbal, silence, all of those are really, really interesting ways to get people to say things that they don't expect.
Apart from like practice and just doing this for long enough, or maybe having some sort of by the way, when you are studying journalism, do they go into like interview technique and like how to interview people? Is that like a whole thing?
I don't know. I didn't study journalism. I studied English.
Oh, did you not? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, in like when you study journalism, if like is like interviewing like a whole thing that you have to study and like get good at. Yeah. Okay, cool.
But it's also just practice. And like, if you imagine yourself interviewing people all the time, if you're up to it, it might be fun to talk to people in front of you at the grocery store or you're standing in line and you say to somebody, hey, where you're from, or how long have you been standing here? I know, but the more you get used to talking to people, the easier it will become to start listening to them, strangely. And people love to tell stories. They love to tell stories. And one of the weirdest things that I've found is that I don't know that everyone is interesting, but I believe firmly everyone has an interesting story to tell. And it's just if you can unlock that in people. And that's what's so cool is when you find that moment of passion inside somebody. And people are generally happy to share it. We're social animals. We like to tell stories. And so if you can figure out a way of not thinking of it as I'm interviewing someone, but actually unlocking a story within them, then that becomes a super interesting psychological power that you have.
It is important because I think one of the things that lots of people really suck at, I think we're all very good at talking about ourselves because let's be honest, who doesn't like to talk about themselves? A little bit of narcissism is okay. Just a little bit. But you'll notice, it's like when you're in a conversation with someone, we've all been in those conversations where you tell a story and then the other person sitting opposite you tells a story that's similar to your story. And there's this back and forth about stories. And it's kind of like how you get to know someone, right? But if you don't ask questions and you don't ask the right questions, you don't get those bits back. So it is like this skill, isn't it, of like asking the right questions and trying to actually be proactive in getting to know somebody. And I think even in a work context, that's a good thing. I have always done that, especially with people who don't like me naturally. Like when you meet someone and you're like, I don't think that person likes me very much. I will go down the route of like, I'm gonna kill you with kindness and probably with questions. And I will find out everything there is to know about you, not so that I can use it against you, but so that you can see that I'm not an asshole, so that we can get to know each other on a deeper level, and you can figure out how we can figure out how we can work together. Which leads me on to the next question, which is where do you think, aside from content creation, having these skills actually is really beneficial? Obviously, I'm talking about internal relationships with people, but are there other ways that being interviewing and asking good questions and listening are useful skills to have?
Sure.
Or in life?
Your life, definitely life. Well, it's funny. I know people who kind of like were able to form more productive work relationships because I found out that one person was an electric engineer and another person was also an electric engineer, and put them together, and now they're best friends. But well, for example, uh, if you want to know what channels to use for your particular personas, everybody assumes, for example, when you start a campaign, you have to do LinkedIn, you have to do paid social, blah, 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 blah. Well, do you actually know how your customers find out about information about different products? Why don't you go ask them? So if you find yourself in a situation, say you're a field marketer at an event, or you're a demand gen person, hanging around with some customers before a webinar, just ask them, hey, how are you finding information these days? You might find that the answer surprises you, and maybe you want to change your channel mix a little bit. Another example is updating personas. I remember we were working for this data integration company. We had assumptions about what engineers were interested in. Do engineers care about business goals? And we assume no, they don't care about business goals. Then we talked to some engineers. Turns out they care a lot about business goals. And so we updated our personas based on these interviews because we'd actually been talking to things that were interesting to them. Another is interviewing subject matter experts. You can find tons of subject matter experts in your company. I was working for a sales tech company, and then I was at the pub of all places with the head of alliances, and I'm like, okay, this guy's the head of alliances. He does partner sales. He was an expert in discovery calls. And so well, this is not content creation, but at least we were able to understand, just interviewing him, able to understand the right way to do a discovery call because he was an expert in it. Who knew? He's over doing partner marketing. Ridiculous. But here he is, being fantastic at this really, really important thing for our marketing. So there are so many scenarios. Customers, if you are in a situation where you interview customers, just finding about the use cases can make your solutions and your solutions and product pages so much richer. So there's so many different ways that you can actually use just talking to people and finding out really what they're thinking and doing that can make all of your marketing a lot better and a lot more precise.
I think one use case for me, less about interviewing, more about being able to ask good questions is when something is going wrong internally and someone's blocking something or someone's just really not vibing with something. Just being able to like kind of dig in and be like, hey, I noticed, you weren't that into that thing, what's going on here, like talk to me, kind of thing. And that can get rid of a lot of blockages. It's obviously not an interview, but it's the same thing of kind of reflecting and letting them talk at you and tell you kind of what's going on, and just listening as much as you can. That really is also key, I think, for anyone in any job, really, because there's always going to be someone there that you need to either convince or get on board or whatever it is.
Great point. And one of the things that I learned in my career was that it does happen, but people generally are not assholes. They do things that you don't like or don't agree with because they're under pressure for some reason or another. And you use the same skills to find out about people, the power of unlocking a story, just the same way, like you said. And if you find out why your counterpart in whatever department is under pressure, then maybe the two of you can solve the problem together and create a much richer experience.
Yeah, you go into work every day, you spend more time with your colleagues than you do with your partner or your family. And I think, like one of the things that we always used to do, we had a very good CEO once upon a time who used to do this thing to all of us, which would get you going, which was a bit like, how are you doing? And then would wait a few seconds. You'd be like, oh, yeah, because, we're all so British. We'd be like, oh, we're all fine. And then he'd go, but how are you really? And he like meant it, like there was a genuine ask, like, how are you actually as a human being on a human to human level? How are you feeling? And it's just that taking that moment to really ask you and dig in revealed so much stuff, about, and it really helped, like in terms of having a good company culture, having good communication between colleagues, caring about feedback, caring about the way that we communicate with each other. Just those things, like those simple questions, make such a difference to your working relationships. And I think especially because we're remote, a lot of us, or we're hybrid or whatever, taking the time to ask people questions that are not just work related are so important, especially if you do want to communicate effectively, which most marketers do. To be honest, most of the time we're asking people for things quite a lot of the time. So if we're going to do that, I think it is important to just take that moment to really check in on your colleagues and make sure people are okay. And I think, that sort of follows on from Ruta's sentiment about, asking people about the kind of like inner workings of your job. But don't forget the bit that is the person that sits behind it. And I think all of these tips are really useful for that as well, because we do have the tendency to forget that bit. And I think, Shana, you were saying how you put those two people together because you'd sat listening to them and their conversations, and you'd found out something about them and put them together, and now they're like really good mates. That's a really good, healthy thing to have happen at work, don't you think?
Yeah. I think how are you is one of the worst questions you can ever ask anybody, because the answer is always going to be I'm fine or I'm okay. Always. And so how can you get to what's really going on? And I think I love that point, because if you say, well, how are you really? Then it's like a little bit of a probe. But are there other ways to kind of get to the truth of how someone really is doing? A lot of times I'll turn the question back on myself and saying, I'm really finding that remote work is kind of getting to me during the winter when I don't go outside enough. Inviting the person to also say, yes, I have that experience as well, or I'm also having that experience. If you make yourself vulnerable, then they feel like they have the space to be vulnerable as well. And then they'll actually say how they're doing rather than just being like, I'm fine. It's okay.
I was waiting for someone to bring up the vulnerability point in interviewing, especially. But yeah, absolutely. Have you got any examples that jump to your mind, kind of what you would use maybe in a, I guess you could totally use that in like a B2B customer type situation. But have you got any of those kind of softening vulnerability, let's get to know each other questions that are your go-tos?
One that I like, and it's so cheesy, but it honestly does work, is when you're in a social situation, like let's say you're at the drinks before an event or something like that, and you're meeting lots of people from your company that you've never met before. And I always find that's like SME farm time. You definitely get a chance to like meet all the experts and things. So this is so cheesy, but it does work. Someone says, "Oh, I work in X," and you say, "Oh my gosh, That must be really hard. Boom, done. They will tell you all about their problems and what they're dealing with and what they've had to, the things that are keeping them up at night. And then you're like, tell me more about that. That sounds so interesting. Keep going, and you just don't be afraid to
we're
be
all
like,
puppets to Shana.
but
She's just orchestrating us all.
it is funny about how all those simple things work. We're all simple. Humans are simple beasts. We're very easy to, and I fall to it too. We all have that, just like you said, Emma, just that little bit of narcissism that makes us want to talk about ourselves. And if you figure out a way to unlock it, because nobody likes, tell me about yourself, but gosh, your job must be hard. Yeah, I'm going to tell you how hard it is. And they do.
Welcome to the podcast.
Have you ever had somebody on who
Well,
just would
awesome
not talk? Like a guest who just wouldn't answer anything?
We've had people we've needed to warm up.
Yeah. And we've had people that we've had quite a few people that just won't answer the question, but they think they did, which is quite tough because you don't want to keep going back to the question, because you can kind of see them get a little frustrated because they feel like they've answered the question. You're like, no, I don't think you did.
That's where that journalist bit comes in, and I didn't realize we'd ever have to do that with other marketers. I thought, yeah, they'll tell us everything, but yeah, there are people that they'll answer in a kind of, maybe it's a bit fluffier than we would like, because one of the things we try to do is to make sure we've got really solid, tangible advice for people, and if we don't think we're getting that out of somebody, we will try and poke a bit harder. And that isn't easy. But I think Ruta and I have got to the point where we've done this so often together, and we're very lucky that we've got each other, because we kind of, can play good cop, bad cop sometimes and things like that. That we know when to poke. We give the other person the eyebrows or whatever, and we know it's time.
Yeah.
Ask it again. Ask it differently. So, speaking of being practical, thank you for that segue, Emma. Can you give us a bit of a framework around conducting a successful interview within the kind of, I guess, purpose of content creation?
Sure. I will, if it's okay with you, I'll share my screen because I've got one. I prepared in advance.
Yay.
I don't know if I'm supposed to say that.
Oh my God. This is a first time special.
We've got a screen share on the podcast, so if you're listening to this on Spotify, you will be able to download this from the Blame It on Marketing community. So if you think you're missing out, you'll be able to grab it from there, and obviously you can message Shana as well if you've got any other questions. But
fantastic. So this is your classic journalist inverted pyramid. You may have encountered this in school. This is the really classic way to just construct a story, but it honestly works. And so why mess with success? So there are 3 sections of the inverted pyramid. The first is the lead, which is the information the reader will be lost without. Who, what, when, where, and why. And I started thinking about how we construct leads. And we do this all the time, right? So let's say, this morning I saw a really great Instagram video of a guy in Florida fighting off an alligator with a trash can lid. And I thought, okay, if I want to tell Emma and Ruta about this story, what am I going to say? I'm going to say, ladies, you'll never believe what I saw this morning. I saw a video of a man in Florida fighting off an alligator with a trash can lid. Who, what, when, where, and why. You've got all that, right? And so we very naturally tell stories that way. And then you might ask for things like, wait a minute, really? What happened? Why was he fighting off the alligator with the trash can lid? Then you're going to want to have the body, which are the important details. Now, you could live without those things. They're not as important to the story as the lead, but this is really important to kind of flesh out your story and make it seem more real. So evidence and anecdotes and quotes and more detail and background and context, all of the things that make the story seem very rich and very believable and authentic. And that's what your SME is going to provide. And that's why you stop talking. So they'll provide you all of those anecdotes and backgrounds and context. And then the final thing is the conclusion. What are the takeaways, the lessons, what you want the reader to do next? And the idea as you're constructing your interview is you subtly guide the listener, your audience, to do the thing, whatever it is you want them to do. And the SME will help you get the audience to that place. So when you are talking with with your interviewee, find out what the most important lesson they learned is and what the important takeaway that they had is, and then figure out how you would want the reader to come to the same conclusions that the interviewee did and take the same actions or different actions. Maybe they'll say, this is a lesson you shouldn't do. And so that is the structure by which you do it. And then the next part is, when you prep, having your inverted pyramid in mind. These are just 6 steps, which I think are really useful to how to always answer the question, what does my audience most want to know from this person? So you outline how you think the story will go if you have some time to prepare, and then think through the questions that will get you to that story. And then you write those questions thinking through that story with your audience in mind. What do they most want to hear? You structure your questions to build your inverted pyramid to get the who, what, when, where, and why first. And then when you're actually having the interview, you'll probably find that it's not going to go the way you want it to go. Dump your questions. Honestly, don't be afraid to do it. And then just go where the story leads you. And then you can reconstruct the pyramid from what you actually have. So we'll share all that with you. But yeah, it's classic and it works every time, I promise.
And in terms of conducting the actual interview, would you conduct it in that kind of structure of the inverted pyramid, if you can, obviously, depending on how things go?
Yeah, if you can. And I think the thing that you most want to do is set the stage for the person telling you all the elements of the story as quickly and clearly as possible. And so that's how you want to construct your questions. So for me, when you built this interview, the first thing you did was, we're going to teach you how to overcome your reluctance for interviewing, and then we're going to teach you the skills and how to do it. That's a great way to structure this program, because you want to tell people that don't be afraid of interviewing, and there are really simple things that you can learn how to do it. And then you used me to get out those particular ideas in order to bring that story to life. That's an awesome way to structure an interview. And I played along with the structure that you created, because, it made a lot of sense to me as a subject matter expert. And that's exactly what you want to do. So you figured out ahead of time how you wanted the story to go, and then had me fill in all the blanks. And that's exactly what you want to do.
One additional question I have about interviewing. So obviously, when we do a podcast like this, we have the pleasure of somebody like you putting their hands up, being like, hey, I want to talk about this thing. We then have a little pre-recording interview, not an interview, pre-recording session where we chat about the thing. We kind of get to know each other, what's appropriate. And then we construct our questions, and then we actually film the podcast and ask you these things. So there's a lot of prep on the speaker side or the interviewee side that can be done. Do you ever pre-prep in any way the interviewee that maybe is a customer? Would you put any of those steps in, or is it just kind of too much and too weird and you kind of have to do it in that one interview with them?
Oh gosh, if you can pre-prep the interviewee, the customer, absolutely do it. You never want, for most B2B scenarios, you never want the person to feel like they're being ambushed in any way. You want them to feel happy and comfortable. So you want to know what they want to say ahead of time. And then you want to be able to help them plan out the interview to the structure to which you've described. Now, if there are happy surprises along the way, like cool stories or things that they've disagreed with or something like that, that's great. And then you can build around that. But you always want to make sure that the person is kind of on board with you. But then you might find yourself in situations where you're doing an interview, like if you're at an event or something, you're just talking with a customer, and you won't have the opportunity to kind of prepare in advance. And that's okay. As long as you remember, what would my audience most want to hear about this person or hear from this person? And you always keep that in mind. Then you'll be able to get enough of a story that you can use them for an advocate later, or you can book some time later with them to do a more formal interview, or even just use the information for background research. But if you can prepare for a kind of interview where you are creating content, it's really better.
One of the things that strikes me about talking about all this, and actually just thinking back to the junior marketers stuff for a second, is one of the reasons why we all get so worried about doing this is sometimes we don't want to look stupid, in front of a customer. So, and I know that, Shana, you said to us in this prep call, you were sort of saying, actually being stupid or pretending to be stupid, asking stupid questions is actually a really good technique. So I just wondered if you could talk us through what you mean by that, and how we can all feel comfortable with feeling a bit stupid. That would be awesome.
So I have a funny story about this, because I was thinking to myself, well, are there any reasons to not look stupid in an interview, not be afraid to ask stupid questions? And then I thought, well, if you're actually an expert in the story and then in the subject, and then the two of you are talking together, and then I remembered this story, which made me laugh. So I was working for a political radio show in Washington, D.C. And my host was a bit of a philosopher. He majored in philosophy and thought of himself as a political philosopher. And he had a guest on who also thought of himself as a bit of a political philosopher. And so we got the two of them together, and they spent half an hour talking about Platonic theory of government. And I could literally hear radio stations all across America switching off. When you when you think about remembering what your audience wants to know, if you try to appear smart in front of your interviewer, what you're going to end up with at the end of your interview is a lot of you appearing to look smart, and your interviewee either agreeing with you or lots of them going, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. People love to be experts in things. People love to think like they're smart. So if you can step back for a minute and let them shine, and let them be the expert rather than you being the expert, then they're going to feel so much joy and engagement in that interview, because they get to explain the thing that they're passionate about or they're interested in. And that means that they get to shine, which means they're much more likely to give you the things that your audience is going to find valuable. So let me say that again. They'll be more likely to give you the things that your audience finds valuable. And so it's really important to not be afraid to ask dumb questions, get things wrong. Because the other thing people love doing is correcting people. They love correcting people. Let them do it. Everybody loves an actually, right? And so give them the opportunity. It's all about great interviewing is never about you, never. And if it is, then it's a different kind of interview altogether. It's all about your interviewee. Let them be the hero. And the only way you can be the hero is if you step back and give them the pedestal.
That's a great little clip there to
Nugget.
summarize this whole little nugget to summarize this whole
How have we
podcast.
done? Would you,
Emma,
would
stop
you-
asking for feedback.
I just want the feedback. I want to know if we did okay. What can we improve on?
Yeah, what
if
can we
you
improve
said
on?
Feedback.
Feedback, Shana.
I think you guys did a great job. I think, yeah, it was structured well. I thought we got a great story out there. I thought that we helped people understand the skills of interviewing.
So now on to our last segment of the Blame on Marketing podcast, which is marketing gossip. So is there anything that you've seen out there in the world that is either annoying you or that is cool and trendy and you want to share with us? Any gossip for us?
Two things which I think are quite interesting. The first is that I am really interested in what's happening in the world with whether or not marketers should be using AI. And this is a sort of an interesting thing for me with DNA as a content marketer, because you'd think that it would be very easy to replace content marketers with AI. In fact, a lot are being replaced by AI. And the work that is coming out of it as a result is not very good. But then you can make an argument that the work that was coming out of content departments that were being asked to produce more and more and more and more and more and more volumes was also not very good. And the question is, now where do we go? And is it a mistake for marketing departments to think, well, we can just get rid of our writing staffs because ChatGPT can write everything? There are an awful lot of heads of content marketers out of a job right now. And I think what's happening is that we made content both necessary and not strategic. And that's really alarming to me, because so many content departments, and I consult with a number of companies with their content marketing departments, And very few really understand what or why they're producing all of the volume that they need to produce. They just know they need to produce more stuff. And the fact that they can't connect it to anything and can't connect it to the larger marketing mission and the larger business mission, that worries me, because that means that you are going to be replaced with AI slop, or you were replaced by content farms slop, and it's cheap and it's not doing anybody any good. It's not doing audiences any good. And so now we're at a place where people, pipeline is down. It's harder to connect with audiences, and customers are fragmented, and we don't understand how to connect with people because we don't understand what they want to hear. And so we think the answer is, let's give them more crap made with AI, prompted by somebody, God knows who, and we're going to turn around in 5 years, and all these companies will have lost their entire go-to-market strategy because they thought that they could replace stuff with AI. But it turns out what they actually needed to do is think about what their audiences actually wanted. Anyway, that worries me. That's on my mind.
That totally makes sense. We spoke about this a couple of seasons ago now, I think, which is that AI is great and I love AI, but there needs to be someone to judge whether what the AI is outputting is good. And that's the bit where if you fire your writers and your content marketers, you won't have anyone judging whether it's good, whether the prompts are right, whether the audience is right, because there's just that there isn't natural kind of built-in systems to do that when you just ask a chat GPT to write your blog post. So yeah, totally relate to that.
And it's deeper too, because I think a lot of marketers feel very disconnected from the overall business. We just do things because somebody asked us to do them. But we're going to get to a point where AI can do more and more and more of that. And then what is the point of marketing? Well, marketing has a huge point, and AI can never replace the judgment about what audiences want to hear and how to connect with audiences, and understanding those stories and understanding what's valuable. People still want to talk to people, so why don't we let people talk to them? Because nobody really understands the strategic importance and how to measure the investment you make in talking with people. And I feel like even marketing leaders don't really understand that. They just feel like, oh, well, I got to have a webinar today, or I have to have a white paper today. Well, nobody wants that anymore. And no one's listening to the people who have information about that. So this is why doing interviews is so important, because you'll have that information and then you can say, here is what I am judging on my research. And so that will make you a more valuable marketer.
Yeah, I think it is that whole thing. It's like, use it strategically, make AI and automation and those tools your friend that help you do your job better, however it is that you think it is best to do that. But equally, I think it's interesting that business leaders aren't doing things like look at, like the sales process, for example. Like Ruta and I have talked about this a lot, about improving buying experiences, those sorts of things. And those are things that AI tools could support and help. That's not to say we're trying to say, keep the marketers, get rid of the salespeople. We don't mean that. But if you can make some of those processes slicker, like you say, if you can understand what your audience actually really wants, not just from a marketing content perspective, but from a like buying, how do I buy this thing? And what do I expect from customer success and all of those sorts of things, those tools have got other places where they could be used. So yeah, I think it's about understanding that whole thing. How could you use it across the whole customer experience, not just vetoing marketing and ditching your copywriters. So yeah, that's my TED talk for today.
Well, ladies, thank you so much to both of you. Shana, thank you for joining us. It's been really, really useful, and we're glad we got our interview skills grilled a little bit. But we'll be sharing that framework that Shana showed us in the Blame It on Marketing community, so you can grab it there, or you can watch her talk through it if you're watching this on video on YouTube. Thank you very much, everyone. We hope to see you on blameitonmarketing.com. And yeah, until the next one.